Do you ever wonder how speech and voice play into creating characters with real integrity on stage?
Hi, I'm Kate Glasheen, and that was my guest today, the multi-talented Maggie Lou Rader. You can learn more about her at maggielourader.com, and if you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe below. Let's get started. As a voice, dialect, and text coach, my job is to help actors vocally embody the characters the playwright has laid out on the page. And that's gotten me wondering, what is the playwright's process regarding their characters' voices, dialects, and language? Maggie joins me today to talk about what happens on the other side of the script. Maggie is an equity actor, teaching artist, and published playwright who writes epic plays about epic women. Well, hi Maggie, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about voice and speech and all the language aspects of creating characters for plays.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to get to see you anytime.
Well, thank you, and a joy to see you too. So you're both an actor and a playwright. When did you and why did you begin writing plays?
I've been writing since I was in third grade. I actually wrote a play for my third grade music class, so I've always loved writing, but it really professionally came about out of necessity. I was working at a theater that we had it slotted for me to do a one-woman show, and it ended up, we thought we had the rights to the show, and then we didn't, and I read 40 one-woman shows that summer, knowing the show had go up in September. And what I found when I read those 40 shows, that they were about shoes, dating, and assault. And I thought, there has got to be more to our story than our accessories, dating, and trauma. And so I had a crazy idea. I called the artistic director late one night and I said, hey, what would you think if I wrote a play? And he said, oh, that's a scary timeline for that to happen. And I said, yes, it's a scary timeline anyway. So what do we do? And luckily he had enough faith in me that I got to throw together a draft of a play. And he told me if it had legs in 2 weeks, then we could move forward. And luckily, he thought it did. So Mary's Monster was born, and I ended up doing Mary's Monster at the No Theater of Cincinnati in September of 2018. And it's been going from there. I'm still very much a professional working actor, but it's really great to come to the world of theater and contribute to the world of theater in this way as well, and creating pieces that I wish would have existed for me as my first decade as a professional actor.
That is an incredible story, a way of being thrown into writing a one-woman play. Wow. Let's talk about the role that voice and speech and language and maybe even dialect play as you create your characters. What part does that play in your process as a playwright?
I'd say it's the baseline. As I create these people, ultimately I want to create characters with integrity, and that aren't just one, two-dimensional characters on the stage, that ring true for me as well as the audience. So when I create a character, as you can see, I have my crazy collage that I used to create my last play, Let Her Rip, which is a tale about the crosshairs of the Match Women labor movement and the Ripper murders of 1888 in Whitechapel. And it's a three-hander with three women, and they all sound very different. One is from Birmingham, one is from Ireland, and one is of Nigerian descent. And as I was creating these people, it was such a deep dive into, well, how many siblings do they have? Where did they grow up? What's their education? What's their socioeconomic status? Because all of those questions play into how these people sound. And this play just workshopped at the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company, and one of the big questions that I had is, for instance, Nana, who is my character of Nigerian descent, I had no idea. That was one of the things I brought in, saying, I have no idea what Nana sounds like. I don't know if she sounds like her grandparents. I don't know if she sounds like an English girl. I don't know ultimately what will serve this actor, how long she's been living in this country. And it was a great conversation that we got to have in the rehearsal room of, well, what do we gain if she is a first-generation immigrant or if she's a third?
That's fascinating. That's all the kind of information that a dialect coach will look at when we are, we'll glean the script for those little bits and pieces. How long have they been speaking English or whatever language it may be in? Where are their parents from? All those things will have an impact on a speaker's dialect and speech and grasp of the language they're speaking. So we love it when the playwright gives us those details. And so what I'm curious about now is, when you just determine that, whether it's completely from you or you've workshopped it with the actual actors, what kind of research do you then do?
Research is actually one of my favorite things to do as a writer. Most of my plays are based on historical events, historical people, and the history of swearing is a hilarious one, but also super interesting and tells you so much about the person. What do they say when they're angry? And when you're trying to actually research how people talked, for some reason profanity is one of those things that has actually been pretty well documented. And it's a really great in when you're creating these people. It's like, what do they say in a moment of passion? What do they say when they stub their toe? What do they say when they're really angry or upset? And that's one of my favorite things to research is profanity and slang of the time too.
That stuff is fascinating. Yeah, the history of swearing or kind of reflecting what they would say at the time, that's one aspect of the language. But in a period piece like Let Her Rip, do you try to reflect the language of the time completely? Do you kind of like 70% what I think they'd sound like, or the language they'd use and a little bit of contemporary, or how much do you consider that in a period piece?
This is probably a great measure and gauge of how I've grown as a writer. During when I was writing Mary's Monster, there was one use of the F word, and it's a really funny line, and she's completely justified in saying it. And even though that word was definitely of the vernacular at the time, it still rings strange in our ear when you're hearing nothing but Victorian language. So I really debated whether or not to take it out, and ultimately I decided to leave it. One, because it is of the time. It is not anachronistic at all. And it's exactly what I want her to say in that moment. It's exactly the intention, it's exactly the feeling behind it. And as I've kept writing, I wrote a play about a year ago about Meep Geese called The Helpers. And she was the woman who helped the Frank family hide during World War II, as well as others. But I struggled. That was when I was really starting to figure out how much anachronisms do I want her to be used in this play. And ultimately, I decided that I'm not going to rewrite the Diary of Anne Frank. The play's already been written. It's beautiful. It's great. And ultimately why I'm writing this play at the time in 2020 is because I want it to resonate with a contemporary audience. I want this play to resonate today. So when they say, well, America isn't looking too kindly on refugees these days, that it rings true for us because there's a reason I'm writing this play today. So it's always a balancing act. Whenever I write plays about these women from history, one, I want to create a piece that if they were going to the theater, they would love and enjoy. So Meep Geese's play is very much the length and the style of plays that she would have seen when she went to the theater. Let Her Rip is very short. Very few of these women were educated. They speak coarsely and they speak rough, and I think they would think it's hilarious. And so ultimately, I want to create a piece of theater that resonates true today, and if that means there's anachronisms and, in the stage directions I say that M brings in the Victorian equivalent of Leslie Knope binders, that's okay, because I am writing this story for us today, even though it's about people from the past, while also walking that line of making sure M and Nana and Liza would also love this story, because it's short, it's fun, it's hilarious until it's not. And if we create theater to, or if I create theater to try to honor these women and their stories, that's part of it.
I would never have thought of that. That's a really fascinating lens to write through. So when the seeds for these plays start forming, all these people are coming from just your brain, right? They're coming from one source. So do they all kind of start off in your voice, and then you have to make conscious differentiations, or do you hear them as distinctive people from the beginning?
The first few plays I wrote, the first one was a one-woman show, so of course she was written for me to say. So I wrote her with my voice in mind. And as I move forward, my next few plays were very much about a woman and the world around her. And they are probably a lot closer to my voice than a lot of the other people I've created. And the last two shows that I've written, Let Her Rip, and another one of my plays called The Wonder, that is currently a semi-finalist for the O'Neill, and I'm so excited. I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed that it keeps going and all the things. But those two pieces are very much ensemble pieces. It is not about a woman and her world. It is about a world here and now. And how that a lot of that is their voice, and hopefully it's me learning how to create that voice, honor that voice, and also, this is a little hippy-dippy, but it's absolutely true, it's listening to that voice. The ending of Let Her Rip is completely different than what I had planned, and that's not because of me. It's as I cultivated these voices, they led me where they wanted to go. And ultimately, I wanted to honor that. And honestly, the end of the play is much better now than it would have been before.
So one other thing I wanted to ask you about, when you get to the stage where you want to start hearing your words, these characters, out loud, how intentional are you about the actors you invite to do a reading? Do you try to cast it as you think you're hearing it, or do you want to just open it up and see if the words and the people you've written come through anybody?
I'm the luckiest playwright and actor that I know, because my friends are the most talented people I know. But there's always something to doing another reading of people you don't know, or people who don't come to mind first and foremost in the role. And if both groups of actors can find success with the script, then that's ideal. Obviously, the people who I wrote it for are going to do well because I wrote it with their voice in mind. But if it's also ringing true for people I don't know, people who don't know my voice as a playwright, people who perhaps would not be in the short stack of headshots and resumes for the role in a production, then that means the script is strong enough to live anywhere in between.
Yeah, a really good barometer for how the integrity that you were discussing before that you want to create in your characters. All of this has been so interesting. Thank you so much for talking about your process as a playwright with voice and speech and language and all the things. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. You're just so cool, and your world is something that I've never been incredibly good at, and I just love watching you work and other voice teachers work. As someone from rural Oklahoma, voice has always been a struggle for me, and writing is an incredible avenue that I get to play with it in a different way. So thank you.
You're very welcome, and I'm very excited to see whose stories you tell next.